All right, so the last piece of this energy puzzle, I guess, for life is talking about anaerobic respiration in a little bit more detail. So, most living things actually use oxygen in order to make ATP, and we call this aerobic respiration. However, there are many living things that can make ATP without oxygen, but they can use aerobic respiration when oxygen is present. And if there's no oxygen or a lack of oxygen, they will use anaerobic respiration. And remember, the prefix an means without. And so without air is a way to think of that. There is also some bacteria that will only use anaerobic respiration, and oxygen can actually be poisonous to them. So fermentation is a type of anaerobic respiration that includes the process of glycolysis, followed by converting pyruvic acid into one or more other compounds and the formation of NAD+, which is an energy molecule. So organisms that do fermentation include bacteria, yeast, and even humans. Some products of fermentation that we use are yogurt, bread, wine, and biofuels. And there are two types of fermentation. We have lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation. So lactic acid fermentation is a type of anaerobic respiration that includes the process of glycolysis from cellular respiration. And so remember, glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm. And it's followed by the conversion of that pyruvic acid into something called lactic acid and the formation of NAD+. So in bacteria, they do this, and lactic acid is a method of producing yogurt. And humans do this in our muscle cells. When you work out a lot or do a lot of physical activity in one short amount of time. So, like for example, I know when I was younger, we had to do the presidential physical fitness test, and you had to get so many sit-ups in a minute. And so as you're crunching through those sit-ups, your abdomen starts to, quote unquote, feel the burn. And that is your body building up this lactic acid, because your abdomen muscles have started to perform lactic acid fermentation because there's not enough oxygen getting to those muscle cells. So it has to switch over to an anaerobic form of respiration. So this diagram here shows you how we take pyruvic acid, and pyruvic acid has 1, 2, 3 carbon atoms, and it converts it into another 3 carbon atom molecule, but it's called lactic acid. And it shows how you take NADH and it converts it into 2 molecules of NAD+. Alcoholic fermentation is another type of anaerobic respiration. Again, it includes glycolysis, and it converts pyruvic acid into ethanol. And ethanol is a type of alcohol. And it will also produce carbon dioxide and form NAD+. So yeast performs alcoholic fermentation. We put yeast in our bread dough, and which allows the bread dough to rise because of the carbon dioxide being released. And so that's where we get our bubbles and our holes in the bread. And that's from where the carbon dioxide was trapped. And we also use yeast in order to make wine and other beers and spirits. And we can use bacteria using alcoholic fermentation to make biofuels. We should know around here that ethanol is a biofuel. And so we use bacteria to produce that. Again, the diagram shows us taking 2 pyruvic acids. We produce 2 molecules of carbon dioxide and produce the 2 molecules of ethanol. Notice how our 1, 2, 3 carbon atoms get split up into the 1 into the carbon dioxide, and then 2 and 3 make ethanol. So ethanol is only a 2 carbon compound. So when we look at anaerobic versus aerobic respiration, it's important to know that aerobic evolved after anaerobic respiration, because some anaerobic organisms evolved before the atmosphere contained oxygen. And so the oxygen actually needed to be added to the atmosphere. So comparing and contrasting, aerobic respiration releases more energy than anaerobic, and it can release up to 38 ATP molecules. Aerobic organisms dominate life on Earth. They're multicellular and larger in size. One of the drawbacks of aerobic respiration is that it produces ATP relatively slowly compared to anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration, organisms can only split glucose and release 2 ATP, because that's what happens in glycolysis. We only get 2 net ATP molecules. Organisms can live where there's limited or no oxygen, especially in deep water, in the soil, in digestive tracts of animals is where you'd find anaerobic organisms. One of the big benefits of anaerobic respiration is that it produces ATP relatively quickly. So that's just a quick little look at anaerobic versus aerobic, and a little more detail into alcoholic and lactic acid fermentation.